Stop letting cardio rob your hypertrophy gains, right? As bodybuilders, we always have this big concern with doing cardio and the impact it's going to have on resistance training. We're bodybuilders. Our main goal is building as much muscle as possible, and cardio can take away that. And what that is concurrent training, and combine cardio and resistance training together, and you can kind of interfere with the effect of one, right? So cardio has a certain stimulus that it's providing, and those adaptations are usually endurance-based, which if you look like an endurance athlete, like a marathon runner, that's kind of the opposite of what we want to be doing with bodybuilding. And for resistance training, we give a hard stimulus and have these hypertrophy adaptations occur. Do it too close together or too much cardio together, and it kind of impedes that hypertrophy signaling to where you might not grow as much as possible. That's not to say to never do cardio. That might be the quick answer you go to, right? Well, if I just want to get big as possible, John, I just want to do cardio. But I think there are some good advantages to doing cardio, and sometimes you just have to, right? So if you're a contest prep bodybuilder, sometimes you just have to make the energy expenditure there to get contest lean. In the off season though, a lot of guys just stop doing cardio, but there could be potentially benefits there. The health benefits, right? Cardiovascular fitness, there's great changes for heart health that can occur. We want to be healthy and be able to bodybuild for a long period of time. So heart health is important to have in place. Also, cardio can help with stress relief. I think it can aid sleep as well. So just having good cardiovascular fitness, if you get really heavy in the off season, you have a hard time breathing, sometimes their sleep apnea gets worse, and just having improved oxygenation can be a benefit for sleep. Also, you ever get off that hard set of squats and you're just totally gassed, or maybe you just gassed out because you're doing reps and your muscle didn't even fatigue yet, and you get done and you're just gasping for air. It takes you like 5 minutes before you can do your next work set. Maybe your cardiovascular fitness really sucks, and so cardio can give you some aid in helping keep that capacity up for recovering between sets. So now that we know we probably should do a little bit of cardio in the off season, and it's probably a necessary evil in contest prep, how should we do it to limit the interference effect, to keep the most muscle retention possible as we diet, and also not limit muscle growth as we're bulking in the off season? I'm here in my cardio room, got my Stairmaster, I have a spin bike next to me too. So we're gonna look through all the modalities, the durations, times, everything involved with implementing cardio, but trying to limit the effect on resistance training as much as possible. So, first thing we're gonna look at, the modality, the type of cardio that you're doing. Should you do the spin bike or the Stairmaster, or go run? And what it looks like is, in the literature, is cardio modalities that mimic your resistance training movements the best. So ones that give you a high degree of hip flexion, just like think about a squat. You know, you squat down deep in the hole and you have that hip flexion occur. What cardio modality mimics that the best? And it looks like cycling is. So when they compare cycling to running with a high degree of hip flexion, it has less interference effect than what running does, and doesn't impede hypertrophy and strength gains as much. So you want to pick cardio that has that larger range of motion. With running, you have a limited range of motion, can tend to lead to less hip mobility, and also in runners, it shows decrease in jump performance and strength. So running's not the best option. And also comparing those two is there's a high eccentric muscle damage component with running. So that muscle damage and that high impact damages tissue, and that causes a lot more fatigue and takes just longer to recover from in general. So if you have damaged muscle tissue and you're going into a training session for legs, you're going to be limiting performance. So the cycling has a very, very low impact. Now, the issue with cycling is that you do have to keep the intensity fairly high to get heart rate up. And just that metabolic stress on its own can be very, very fatiguing. So there is a slight disadvantage you have to weigh out there. Now, there are some in-betweens that I think are a good advantage for picking your cardio. One being the arc trainer. The arc trainer is nice because it has a large range of motion and degree of hip flexion, just like cycling. However, it's also very low impact. And you're having to use your whole body weight to move the machine, so you're not having to go at this really fast speed like a cycle, like when you're cycling, to keep heart rate up. So that, I think, is one of the better options. The disadvantage, though, is that you do have to make sure you keep that rate up, and you have to be kind of mindful the whole time. And in prep, you just like want to get on the cardio machine and not think about it. Maybe that's when the Stairmaster does have a slight advantage. over some of the other ones. Although the range of motion is a little bit less, the degree of muscle damage is kind of in the middle between like running and cycling. It's definitely a little bit more than doing like an elliptical. However, that nice constant pace, you can kind of be a little bit mindless on it. So for picking your cardio modality, it's going to come down to being able to get the right energy expenditure, but also whatever's going to limit impeding your gym performance when you're going into training. Next, we should look at how hard should you do cardio. Should you do HIIT? Should you do moderate? Should you do LISS? So regarding for fat loss, comparing HIIT cardio to moderate intensity cardio, even for low intensity cardio, if you just equate energy expenditure across the board, and you really aren't going to see a huge difference in fat loss. So you might have to do longer cardio if you do low intensity, like maybe really, really long if you're just walking outside. Also doing moderate intensity, you might be middle of the road, HIIT even shorter period of time. HIIT is on paper looks really good. Acutely, it mimics resistance training because you have a high degree of motor unit recruitment. You're using similar energy systems like creatine phosphate system. It's anaerobic. So yes, it does mimic resistance training somewhat. However, it does have all the negatives that can come along resistance training with high muscle damage, high levels of fatigue. It's like another resistance training session in its own. So going into a lower body training session after doing HIIT can be very, very fatiguing. So you have to be strategic if you are going to be doing HIIT and program appropriately. And I would say keep it 48 hours to 72 hours away from your resistance training. Also, if you're a big bodybuilder, it's going to be way more taxing, especially psychologically, mentally, than say if you're a smaller competitor, like a bikini competitor or just a lighter weight individual, and you might need that and it won't generate as much fatigue. So for certain instances, that could be an appropriate option. The moderate intensity cardio, I think for bodybuilding is going to be making up a little bit more of the majority. It's going to have the energy expenditure benefit. It'll still have cardiovascular change benefit. However, it just won't be as damaging muscularly. The other one, the far extreme, is low intensity steady state, just going and walking, right? Low intensity walking, what's the advantage there? Well, for one, it's not taxing at all, very limited muscle damage. It's not going to impede any type of hypertrophy signaling. The disadvantage is that you might have to do it for a very long period of time. Most of us don't have time to go walk for like 2 hours a day. So there needs to be some balance between when you're doing HIIT, moderate, or low intensity cardio. Next is going to be the duration of these cardio sessions. How long should they really be? And when comparing 20 to 30 minute cardio sessions to 50 to 60 minute cardio sessions, the 20 to 30 minute have very small impact on your resistance training signaling. So if you have to do 60 minutes of cardio, it would be much better to split that into multiple sessions. Or if you're trying to do 3 sessions of 60 minutes for the week, you divide that into 6 sessions of 20 to 30 minutes and it wouldn't have as much interference effect. Another issue to talk about is specificity of training. So you need to train towards what your goal and focus is. For bodybuilders, we want a lot of muscle. How do you do that? You do hypertrophy training. You don't do cardio. You don't see bodybuilders doing 7 sessions a week of 60 minutes of cardio and weight training one time, right? It's mainly predominantly resistance training. So my guideline for this is I would not make sure that you don't have more cardio sessions than you do resistance training sessions. And I would say moderate intensity to higher intensity cardio. Now, if you need more energy expenditure, you don't necessarily have to do more moderate intensity cardio. You could fill that in with low intensity cardio. So get more active, increase your NEAT. That would be the best way to not go too far high and doing more cardio to where you have those adaptations, but also have that balance where you can still create the energy expenditure. Now in contest prep, it's understandable. Sometimes you just have to go that high in cardio, and the training specificity at that time is getting fat loss off. And that just entails in making that energy deficit possible through more cardio. And regarding time, sometimes we can't just walk outside so much. So there should be a balance between the two. And then timing the sessions. When should you do your cardio? And what would be best, if you had to do HIIT, we already mentioned that doing it 48 hours to 72 hours before a weight training session would be ideal. And giving yourself that time after a lower body session would be better as well. For all your other cardio sessions, It would be better on a day that's not your leg workout. So do it on an upper body training day. If you have to do it on the same day as a lower body day, I would make sure you keep it 6 hours before or after the session. On an upper body day, I would still say the same, keeping it 6 hours before or after. If you have to do it around the same session, then I would do it try to do it upper body day and following after you do your resistance training, or even doing it in the evening might be better. If for some horrible reason you had to do HIIT on a lower body day, don't do it in the morning because that fatigue is going to carry over to resistance training. And what I would do would be do it in the evening, because performance doesn't really matter on your HIIT session. What really matters is you're just trying to get the energy expenditure there. Last thing, fasting or not, or fed state. This could be a huge, long, drawn-out thing. In general, looking at the studies that compare fast and fed state, it's not a huge impact in fat loss, because what comes down to is energy expenditure and also energy intake, and that just being in balance. However, in bodybuilding, they can get very specific, and there's lots of caveats. So a lot of bodybuilders are using drugs, or they're using supplements to increase mobilization and oxidation of fatty acids, and a lot of those can work better in the fasted state. But what do you not want to do in the fasted state if you don't have high glycogen storages is you don't want to do high anaerobic type cardio. So doing your HIIT cardio fast in the morning would be a terrible idea and would lead to decreases in glycogen, higher fatigue, and potentially increases in protein oxidation. Same with like these higher moderate intensity cardio steady states, and for really long durations too. So the higher the intensity, the longer the duration, the more liable you're going to have greater fatigue and also start taking away from amino acids from skeletal tissue. So keep fast cardio down to shorter sessions and limit it to more like low intensity, moderate intensity cardio. What might be of benefit is using some protein prior to training. You could argue that it might impede if you are using some agents that help with fat oxidation and mobilization. However, if we have a few acute studies looking at protein feeding prior to cardio, and it has an increased effect in burning calories and increased fat oxidation after. However, you could argue that it's just a thermic effect of food, and if you had that protein another time of day, you're kind of going to see that same effect. So there's not a lot of data to support that. So I in general don't have a lot of recommendations for fasted cardio, but if you had to do it, do lower or moderate intensity cardio. So that is my overall summary. Just to bring back the main points: choose your modality wisely and have it something that mimics resistance training and isn't too damaging on muscular wise. Limit HIIT and keep it far away from training. The rest of the sessions should be more moderate intensity, steady states, and fill in the rest of your gaps with low intensity walking, get outside, get active. Keep session duration to 20-30 minutes and try not to limit really long sessions of cardio if you can. Keep training specificity in order. So make sure you're focused on keeping resistance training first and limit the number of cardio sessions, and don't let it exceed the number of resistance training sessions. For timing, if you have to do it, try to do it on a separate day of weight training. If on the same day, do it 6 hours before or 6 hours after. If you have to do it in the same session, do it immediately after your resistance training. And fasted fed state cardio, it really comes down to personal preference. If you do have to do it fasted, keep low intensity or moderate intensity cardio at the short durations like we previously mentioned. So hope you enjoyed, you guys. All rundown on cardio. Hope I didn't bore you too much, because we're all about resistance training here on the Animal Pack channel. But anyway, let me know any questions or comments you have below about cardio. I'd be happy to answer for you all, and see you next time.
BP Muscle ตัวแทนนำเข้าและจัดจำหน่ายผลิตภัณฑ์อาหารเสริมแบรนด์ Animal และ Universal รวมไปถึงอุปกรณ์ฟิตเนสแบรนด์ Grizzly อย่างเป็นทางการแต่เพียงผู้เดียว